Elaine McMillion Sheldon, wow, that has been said wrong a lot, um, is an Academy Award nominated, Peabody winning, and two-time Emmy winning documentary filmmaker. Her latest films include a personal meditation on the future of the Appalachian coal fields, King Coal, two observational explorations of the opioid crisis, Heroin and Recovery Boys, a film that follows the separation of pregnant inmates from their children, Tutwiler, and the deindustrialization of rural communities, Hollow, among other economic, cultural, political, and environmental stories. Sheldon's films have been exhibited and screened at film festivals across the US and internationally. She has been nominated for 9 Emmy Awards, 3 Peabody Awards, is a Creative Capital awardee, a Livingston Award finalist, many other things. In 2024, Sheldon was inducted into the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. She lives in Appalachia with her frequent collaborator and cinematographer, Curran Sheldon. So welcome, Elaine, to it. Okay, well, so because there are a lot of students here and people, I wanted to start with talking about your journey as a filmmaker, sort of how you got into the business, and then we'll talk specifically about King Cole, and then we'll open it up for some questions. Okay, so first, just simply, how did you get into filmmaking?
I feel like I should say I didn't know there was a business of film when I got into it. I didn't know a filmmaker, wouldn't know a filmmaker if it hit me in the face. I grew up in the coal fields where journalism was a practical route. I grew up in a very practical family. Everybody in my family is a welder or a logger or a miner or a nurse or something, a teacher, like something we can see in the community. And I would never be so brazen enough to say I wanted to be a filmmaker among that stock of people. So I was going to be a journalist because I could see that in my local community. So I went to journalism school at WVU, West Virginia University. And I was studying writing and photography. And I was graduating during the recession. 2008. There's been many recessions since, but the 2008 recession was a big deal, and newsrooms were closing. And this dream of being a magazine writer, or all the dreams I had as a kid of sort of traveling the world and writing, it felt like that was not a reality anymore, and I thought I needed to skill up. So I was teaching myself what we called then multimedia. And so I started teaching myself multimedia journalism, started making short films, and worked for the local newspaper, started their YouTube channels. If you want to see my first films, which are all awful, you could look at the local Charleston, West Virginia YouTube channel, watch their first films. They're real terrible. So if you need inspo, there you go. So that's how it started. And I got an internship with the Washington Post in their documentary video department. Once I was in there, I was like, oh, this like long form journalism thing where you don't just pop in for a couple hours the way a journalist usually gets to, but like you go back week after week or day after day, at least more than one day. I was like, that's the type of relationship I want with people in the films I'm making. So I made a film. I was making $350 a week working at a newspaper. It was dismal. And I was like, I have to make a film. I don't own a camera. I'm going to make a film from the archives. And so I would spend my lunch breaks and after work hours looking through like microfilm. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. And like filming that and scanning that. And then I went and found people that I found in the microfilm in real life and made a film about them. So that was how I made my first film. And that got me a full ride to get an MFA, which really kind of changed my life because I was in West Virginia where I had zero connections and really no clue about the film industry. But that MFA program in Hollow was my thesis project. And Hollow ended up winning a Peabody Award, right? So it was like I took my thesis project very seriously. And so that's how it all began. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was kind of just blindly searching, but always very connected to the stories back home, where I just felt, it's like you're born in a certain place in a certain time, and there aren't a ton of people where I come from that have the opportunity to tell these stories. So it's a responsibility and privilege, really.
Okay, you're someone who could live anywhere, right? So why is it so important for you to live where you live and to tell the stories that you tell?
So it's like a good place to live. I know most people think it wouldn't be, but it's lovely. The town I live in, I know all my neighbors, and that influences the work. And it's a place that stories still matter, like oral communication still matters. A flyer and poster is still a hot ticket there. Like if you want to know what's going on, you go and you look at the flyers and posters. But I think there's an ethics to it too. I always felt uncomfortable with the trade of journalism of like, don't accept gifts or these things, like not that it's like sharing a meal with someone before I spend 6 months of my life filming their life felt like a pretty like basic human thing to do. And so I immediately felt this sort of like rift between my journalism and my documentary world. And so I kind of had to choose which one I was going. And I've definitely gone like far, far, far into more of the, hybrid documentary world. But living there is part of the story, is part of the, how can I really make a film about people's challenges and triumphs and resilience if I'm not drinking the same water as them and breathing the same air as them? Like, I just feel like it's part of the way I want to tell stories. It's slow. It's, I could be intentional. I could do it cheaply. I mean, that's one big thing, right? Like, I don't have to make a ton of money. And I can come out in the world and other places and meet filmmakers like you and others there are ways I can get sort of the fire lit from the sort of the art or documentary perspective. But back home, that's where all the stories for me that really draw me in are.
Yeah. And what is your kind of, talking about this film specifically, what's your creative process? Like, how do you work with participants? Do you have a small crew, a big crew? Like, what does it look like?
This film was wild, like more people than I've ever worked with before. It's been a while since I watched the film, and I was remembering working with the choreographer to come up with the dance. So this dance was basically, I described to her, the point of the film was sort of this merging of two worlds, like this past and this future merging and then reaching into the unknown. And so she came up with these dance moves. So that's like one very tangible example of how I collaborated with people. I told them the overarching concept of the film, because certainly I didn't know the narrative. It is still a documentary, even though it has these elements of magical realism and narrative and these things. And so part of it was like, this is what I'm aiming to do. What can you do? So I actually hired a breath artist. So a lot of the voices or the sound effects that you hear that sound like birds or trains and things, it's actually a human voice. His name's Shodike Talaferro. And I just showed up at one of his shows one time. He's a beatboxer, and he did this like side thing as breath artist. And breath is such a big part of Appalachian culture. Like, if you know anything about Appalachia, you might know we have things like high asthma rates and black lung disease, and right. So breath is a part of something that's the life there. And I also had learned through making this film that the trees of Central Appalachia are called the lungs of the East Coast, that if it wasn't, 80% of West Virginia wasn't covered by forests, we may not be able to breathe in DC, right? So I thought there was a breath culture there, and I brought Shodike in, and I was like, do your thing, right? So sort of the collaborative thing is like, this is what I'm doing, what can you add to it? For the girls, Lainey and Gabby, they were cast at a dance studio. They're not actors. We put them in situations and was like, do your thing. So what they say is what they said. Like when they're doing the art project and they're talking and mispronouncing bituminous coal, like that's all them. Their talk about what they want to do in the future, that's all them. That wasn't stuff that we fed them. The final scene is something I still think was kind of a miracle to pull off. We just invited 70 to 80 people on top of the mountain and told them to wear black and told them we were holding a funeral for the story of King Cole. Because the concept behind the film, I know you guys just watched it, and it's a lot to absorb because it's like, what was that? I really believe that stories dictate whether our cultures will survive or not. And the current story of Central Appalachia is one of decline. So therefore, that means the culture that I grew up in, that I still respect, certainly could use some revamping in certain ways, but I don't want that to die. Instead, it's a decision of what is the new story? What can we build upon? What is the existing story? What can we build upon to make something new for ourselves? And how much of agency can we put back into the community to be part of that story building? So the final scene was about laying to rest the old story that is currently dividing us, that used to unify us. And so that was like 70 people that we just said, meet us up here and give us your thoughts on what does King Coal mean to you? And for some people, King Coal was like a very clear target. It was like an executive, or it was a coal mine or something. And other people, it was like Heather Hanna, the woman who gave that beautiful speech. Never met her before that day. Had no clue what she was going to say that day. She wrote that speech 10 minutes before we walked up the hill. And I was just like, literally crying my eyes out when we were filming this, because it was almost like she was like finishing the film, and she had never seen a frame of the film, but she was speaking in the way I had already been writing in my narration, which was wild. So that was like totally participatory. I was like, whoever wants to come up and talk, come up and talk. And the whole event took about 2.5 hours. And yeah, it's its own film. Like it needs to be released. I think people would actually enjoy it, because it's everyone from like coal executives to environmentalists to political activists just coming and sharing their truth and like making space for everyone, not arguing to get anyone on their side. So anyway, that was just one way we worked with participants. And then the sort of like more traditional documentary, like the tattoo scene, that's Darren. That's a guy I've known for 12 years. And I knew he owned a tattoo studio. I said, if you have someone come through that's getting a coal mining tattoo, holler at me and we'll come and film it. And their conversation was their conversation. It wasn't one that we, I think the only sort of like pushback we would get from time to time is like, is this film going to politicize our lives? And we really wanted the film to be, I never knew what the film was, to be honest. I didn't know what it was even when we were finishing it. I didn't even know what it was till we were premiering it. And then people told me what I had made. I was like, oh yeah, it is kind of that. But we knew it was about documenting coal culture, and I knew it was an essay film. I knew it was going to be some part memory and some part verite. I absolutely knew that, but I had no clue how it was all going to work. And so when we would pitch to folks like Film at the Pageant or other things, we would say, we're documenting coal culture. Like that would be the thing we were doing. We're not trying to politicize this particular moment. Because I did want the film, I knew I needed the film to be an example of civil dialogue. I knew exactly what coal folks would think of it, because I'm from coal folks. So I like always had my dad and my brother, my uncles and my cousins and everyone who's like, I know their conversations, I know their questions, I know their critiques, and like I didn't know what the outside world would think about it, and I didn't actually care all that much. I thought maybe it'll be for them and maybe it won't, but I need to make this for me and my community. So
I have 2 more questions and then I'll open it up, so start thinking about your questions. So that's really interesting to hear your process. And I'm thinking to myself, there's a movie that is all of these different people debating their feelings about coal. And that's probably a more overtly political movie. So what drew you to make a different kind of movie? And do you think your film is political?
What's not political, right? Yeah. I think those films have been made, and they're good films, like The Last Mountain and other films about mining and mountaintop removal and policy. And I see the crisis of story being one that's more of an internal, like it's less political in the face and more of an internal struggle of identity, like a community's identity, why we would gather, why we would support one another, like the very basics of what it means to be a community member, of what you have in common and what you don't have in common, but the reasons why you step up and lead. Like the one good thing Cole did was bring people together. And often that was through crisis and tragedy, but still it brought people together. And so the film was trying to not do the typical, like, this person said this person said this, but instead ask a question that was almost a documentary about things you can't see but you feel. The unsettling feeling that I think causes a lot of anxiety and resentment, but it speaks to more of the identity of, like, what's next, because ultimately, like, there's not going to be a job that's going to replace all these jobs. It was a mono economy. It was built upon an unrealistic economic model that another job can't take. So it's really about the fact that people continue to stay there, and why? Like, what is the purpose of that? And what do we owe to one another? And what do we want to take to the future? And what stories do we want to take to the future? And tell our kids, like, what is Appalachia? What do we want it to look like? I mean, it was kind of an intention of the final film, was to make sure, like, it was intergenerational, right? Because I do think the stories that we take into the future need to be that. It can't just be, like, the young discarding everything of the past and the past being discarded. We have to think about, like, what we're taking into the future and how to make it new. So it is political, of course, but it's not advocating for, like, I feel like a overly simplified left or right policy decision.
Yeah. The voiceover is such an important part of the film, and you were nominated for an Emmy for the best writing. And curious about what that process was like.
I wish I get this question a lot, and I wish I could better articulate it. Honestly, the process was I took some online writing classes, just essay writing classes, just for funsies in 2018, and I had like 20 pages of just stuff that was spilling out of me, like stuff that was sort of like genealogical stuff I had been discovering about my family that's been in the region for 9 generations, and like just like reflection stuff. And then it started getting quite pointed, and like King Cole kept popping up as a character, and I was like, this is kind of interesting. And then fast forward like a year and a half later, I started describing the film as an essay film, because that was the easiest way to describe it. I didn't know what I was making, but I was like, everybody knows what that is. So the writing process was like getting everything out, and then basically being collaborative with my editor and my producers and folks being like, what is resonating here? Like, what are you I needed an outsider, someone who's not from the place, to read it and realize what was like ranting and what was actual useful information. And then it was like, then the voiceover was, some of it was needed to describe what you were seeing, some of it needed to be historical, some of it needed to be personal, like my own memories, and some of it just needed to move the film forward. So there was different functions, and so it was a matter of just like writing that and curing it down, and we were doing that till the very end.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's give her a round of applause. Thank you so much.